The Galactic Empire's council chamber was a place of power and fear, its cold, shadowy expanse designed to intimidate. The Supreme Commander stood at the center, his towering form draped in ceremonial armor that gleamed under the pale, artificial light. Around him, representatives of various alien species murmured in uneasy agreement. A holographic image of Earth hovered above the table, spinning slowly, tauntingly. "They defy us," the Supreme Commander said, his voice sharp and metallic, cutting through the murmurs like a blade. A backwater planet, with primitive technology and no interstellar presence, dares to challenge the might of the Empire. His gaze swept the room, daring anyone to counter him. An aged ambassador with a translucent, serpentine body spoke, his voice measured but laced with doubt. "We have encountered resistance before, Supreme Commander. But none so persistent. These humans are unpredictable. Dangerous." The Supreme Commander's clawed hand slammed onto the table, silencing the ambassador. "Dangerous? To us. Their stubbornness is nothing but the thrashing of an animal caught in a snare. And I intend to break them." A ripple of approval echoed through the chamber, though it was tinged with unease. The image of Earth dissolved, replaced by a grim projection of its major cities. Names and faces of Earth's leaders scrolled past, marked with red targets. "The Phantom Shadows," the Supreme Commander declared. "They will end this defiance." The air in the room grew heavier as the name was spoken. The Phantom Shadows were not soldiers, they were instruments of terror. Each member of the squad was a legend in their own right, genetically enhanced, surgically altered, and equipped with cloaking devices that rendered them ghosts on the battlefield. They did not fight wars. They ended them. A towering alien general with a crest of glowing spines stepped forward. "The Shadows have never failed. They will infiltrate Earth, remove its leadership, and sow chaos. The humans will kneel, as all others have." The Supreme Commander nodded, his confidence absolute. Yet, there was a flicker of something else, something that even he would not admit aloud. Humanity's defiance had lingered longer than expected. Earth's primitive defenses had repelled smaller incursions. There was something about these creatures that made them difficult to subjugate. As the council adjourned, the Phantom Shadows prepared for deployment. Their leader, a hulking figure with silver-black skin and eyes that glowed like embers, reviewed their mission in silence. His team, a blend of reptilian agility, insectoid precision, and cybernetic perfection, moved with practiced efficiency. They were the best. They were unstoppable. When their stealth ships slipped into Earth's orbit, cloaked and undetectable, the team felt no doubt. They had conquered far greater threats. To them, Earth was just another target, a brief mission before returning to the glory of the Empire. But as the Supreme Commander watched their departure, a thought lingered in his mind, unspoken but persistent. What makes these humans so different? The thought was dismissed almost immediately. They were just another species. Fragile, weak, and doomed. Or so he believed. The Phantom Shadows arrived on Earth under a veil of invisibility, their stealth technology rendering them undetectable by human sensors. They spread across the globe, targeting key cities and government strongholds. Initial strikes were swift and precise. A mayor in Tokyo vanished without a trace. A military general in Washington, D.C. was found dead in his secured bunker. In Berlin, an entire security team was eliminated before they could raise an alarm. The squad moved like shadows, leaving no evidence, only fear. Yet something felt off. The human response was not what they expected. Instead of descending into chaos, Earth's defenses seemed to adapt. Security tightened around vulnerable targets, military communication networks became harder to breach, and the humans displayed a level of coordination that belied their technological inferiority. Reports from the field began to show strange patterns. The first real disruption came during a mission in New York City. A high-ranking diplomat was the target. The assassins infiltrated his penthouse with ease, disabling cameras and guards with their advanced tools. But when they reached the bedroom, they found it empty. No guards, no target, only a simple note left on the bed: "We see you." A ripple of unease ran through the team. It was the first time their presence had been anticipated. Their leader, ever composed, dismissed the incident as human luck. Yet the feeling of being watched persisted. The next encounter escalated the tension. In the wilderness outside Moscow, a pair of shadows set up an ambush for a convoy believed to be transporting military officials. Instead, they found themselves under attack. Traps they couldn't detect had been laid along their route. Explosions and gunfire erupted from nowhere, forcing them to retreat. One of them didn't make it back. His body was found hours later, suspended from a tree, his advanced armor torn open. Carved into his chest plate were the words, "Welcome to Earth." Panic began to spread among the team. They were not used to being hunted. Their cloaking devices were supposed to make them invisible. Their weapons and skills were unmatched. And yet, something was outmaneuvering them. The leader ordered the team to regroup and focus on their primary objectives. But paranoia had already set in. They double-checked their equipment, scanned every corner of their surroundings, and moved with uncharacteristic hesitation. They no longer trusted their own superiority. Reports from the survivors painted a grim picture. The unknown force targeting them was methodical and precise, leaving no trail to follow. It didn't fight them head-on. It stalked them, waited for them to make mistakes, and struck without mercy. For the first time in their storied history, the phantom shadows felt fear. They were not up against a disorganized species clinging to life. They were up against something far more dangerous. And though they didn't know it yet, they had already become prey. John Reaper Kane had been watching them since their arrival. From the moment the phantom shadows set foot on Earth, he had tracked their movements with the precision of a predator. Retired from active duty and living off the grid, Kane had been brought back into action for one reason: the Empire's arrogance had finally reached Earth, and humanity needed a weapon that the aliens could never anticipate. Kane was that weapon. His training had been unconventional. Special forces didn't just teach him to fight, they taught him to think like his enemies, to study their every weakness and exploit it ruthlessly. But this was more than training. Kane had honed his skills in wars fought in jungles, deserts, and cities. He had become an expert in psychological warfare, a master at breaking opponents before a single shot was fired. Against him, even the most advanced killers had no chance. He studied the phantom shadows, learning their patterns, their habits, their weaknesses. Despite their technology, they were predictable. They relied on their cloaking devices, assuming their invisibility made them untouchable. They moved with precision, but that precision became a liability. Every step, every kill, every retreat, they followed protocols designed for species that feared them. Kane didn't fear them. The first strike was subtle. In the ruins of a city they had used as a base, Kane dismantled their surveillance equipment and left no trace. The shadows noticed, but they assumed it was human incompetence. The second strike was less subtle. In an abandoned warehouse, Kane laid traps, a web of explosives, smoke grenades, and a decoy that mimicked human life signs. When two of the assassins entered, the place erupted in chaos. Only one walked out, wounded and shaken. Kane didn't stop. He hacked into their communications, feeding them false information about human movements. He used their advanced technology against them, manipulating their sensors and making them question their own data. When they tried to regroup, they found their meeting points compromised. Supplies disappeared. Tracks they thought they had erased were suddenly uncovered. The invisible hunters were being hunted. The shadows, for all their enhancements, were unused to this kind of warfare. Their training had prepared them for combat, not for the psychological pressure Kane applied. He turned their greatest strength, their confidence, into a weapon against them. They grew paranoid, wasting time and resources searching for threats that weren't there. When they finally caught glimpses of him, it was always from the corner of their vision, a shadow that vanished before they could react. Kane knew how to make himself a ghost. To them, he wasn't a man. He was something else, something terrifying. A force that understood them better than they understood themselves. Every move he made was calculated to chip away at their certainty, to make them doubt their superiority. He wasn't just fighting them. He was breaking them. And as the shadows dwindled in number, Kane left them a single message scrawled into the ground where their leader would find it: "You're not hunting. You're surviving." The last assassin stood alone in the ruins of a city, the once proud phantom shadows reduced to a single survivor. His advanced armor was battered, his cloaking device malfunctioning, and his nerves frayed. He had spent hours trying to recalibrate his systems, but no technology could fix what was broken inside him: fear. The precision that had once defined him was gone, replaced by desperate, erratic movements. He scanned the darkened streets, his enhanced vision picking up every flicker of light, every shadow that moved in the wind. But it wasn't enough. He knew the human was out there, watching, waiting. Every step felt like walking into a trap, every sound like the harbinger of death. The assassin gripped his weapon tightly, his claws trembling. A faint noise echoed behind him. He spun, firing blindly into the darkness. The shots lit up the street for a moment, revealing nothing. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. The human didn't respond with gunfire. He didn't need to. The assassin could feel him, close, but untouchable. Then came the voice. Low, calm, and cold, it cut through the quiet like a blade. "You feel it now, don't you?" it said, the words seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. "That's fear. That's what you've been selling all across the galaxy. How does it feel to buy it for yourself?" The assassin growled, forcing himself to respond. "You think you can stop the Empire?" he hissed, his voice rasping with exhaustion. "You're nothing. Just an insignificant creature on a dying world." "Maybe," the voice replied, almost conversational. "But you're the one bleeding, not me." A shadow shifted in the corner of the assassin's vision. He turned, raising his weapon again, but it was already too late. The human struck with brutal efficiency, disarming him with a single motion and forcing him to the ground. The assassin struggled, but the human moved like a force of nature, unrelenting and methodical. Pinned to the cracked pavement, the assassin looked up at his attacker. The human wasn't wearing any advanced armor, wielding no alien weaponry. His face was streaked with dirt, his clothing practical and unassuming. Yet his eyes held something the assassin couldn't process, something far more terrifying than any technology. "Resolve. You don't understand what you've walked into," the human said, his voice low and steady. "We're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for everything we are. And we don't lose when the stakes are this high." The assassin tried to speak, to bargain, but the human didn't give him the chance. The blade came down swiftly, ending it. The last of the phantom shadows was gone. As dawn broke over the shattered city, Kane stood alone. He carved a single message into the assassin's armor, leaving it where the Empire would find it: "This is Earth. Come and see what happens next." He didn't stay to watch the aftermath. His mission was complete. The galaxy would hear about what had happened here, and the myth of humanity would begin to spread. The Boogeyman had done his job.